Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode, another Friday of Fearless Friday. We're going to amputate fear and embrace a new normal mindset. You're on with John Register. I'm a professional speaker, as well as a combat Army veteran, and did some stuff with the hurdles. And we're just going to be having this conversation. We have an amazing guest who's going to come on as we're going to go through this today. But let me just kind of tee this up for us. Today is all about kind of overcoming the fear of action. Over the course of the last 2 months, I've been doing a lot of presentations to a group of government tech in the government tech space. Probably now about 11 or 12 of those presentations. And one of the things I do is I give a challenge out. And that challenge is because I start the keynote speech off, the challenge I give the audience is to do an action step by 10 o'clock the next morning. They're not to self-evaluate that. They are to get an accountability partner, and they are to check in with that accountability partner at 10 o'clock the next morning as well. And then I want to know what the process is like. So I give them my email address for them to email me what went on in that process. To date, I've spoken to about 2,800 of them. They're about 300 per session. And I've gotten under 15 responses. 15 responses. Yet in the action step part of the evaluations, I've gotten about 15 responses of saying that I didn't give an action step. It's amazing to me that a very specific, and the title slide says action step on it. But people are so, in my opinion, afraid to just take action. And so I brought on an amazing individual today, and we're going to introduce him to you, to just kind of have a little conversation about this and to see how it might help us to overcome the adversity of not taking action. He is a record-holding powerlifter, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and adaptive model who was born with a disability and later diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We also talked with another woman about that. She just ran the Boston Marathon just a couple years ago. Was with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on his new TV show, Titan Games, as well as countless other media outlets like the Washington Post, People Magazine, the Today Show, Netflix, and much more. Has over 7 million views plus on YouTube. I'm trying to get up to 3. And then not 3 million, that's 3 people total. Please welcome to our show this morning on Fearless Friday, the one, the only, Chris Ruden. Welcome, sir.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you heard the kind of the introduction that we were talking, kind of really quickly about this. As Portia Scott comes in, let's say hello to Portia. Good morning to you, Portia Scott. Thanks for being on. Just kind of having this conversation with Chris this morning about overcoming the fear of taking action, or maybe we call it procrastination, but I think it's just the taking the action. What do you think about that? I mean, in your story, obviously you're not holding back. You're taking action on some things.
I wish I could be perfect and I never had that fear of taking action, but I've faced that, and I feel like we all face it all the time. And I think we're more afraid of the bigger picture because it's really hard to digest. It's terrifying to be like, I need to do this huge thing. Maybe it's a proposal, maybe it's a job, maybe it's getting in shape. We see this huge picture and we're terrified because it's overwhelming. But we're afraid of the big picture. We're usually not afraid of the simple action step, the one digestible thing, but we don't often think like that. So I think reframing people's perspective to, I don't need to accomplish this massive task right now. I need to do one simple digestible thing right now. And the compound effect of those steps equals the big thing. But we get too consumed by the big thing, so we end up doing nothing in
right.
fear of everything.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm glad you brought that up. I wasn't even thinking about that. So, so glad. Here's what came up for me when you said that, right? Was as a professional speaker now, one of my greatest challenges is to get people to get me off like the pedestal, not like braggadocio, but just kind of because I've done like the Paralympic Games, won a silver medal and all these things, and tried to say, well, I'm never going to lose a leg like that. I'm never going to, get injured in the military. I'm never going to win a Paralympic medal. And I have to bring that down to say, it is those incremental steps, and it paralyzes people. Even when I was going into the hospitals to talk to some of the injured service members building the military sport program out, it was difficult to start with a silver medal when they're just trying to figure out the first step. So you got to bring it down to that first step level. I love that. So that people see you as relatable, right?
I think that's a big issue, though. A lot of people look for distance for actually taking a step. If I can put distance between you and me, there's a reason why I'm not doing what I need to do. There's a reason why I'm not taking the step, the silver medal, the disability, whatever happened in your life. You were on this show. We're looking for distance, and it removes responsibility. But when I talk about responsibility, I usually break that word up, and it's a response ability. We have the ability to respond. And a lot of times what we're responding to is not the thing we need to be responding to, but rather the distance to create, to remove responsibility from ourselves, from actually taking the step that's going to move the needle for us. Because at the end of the day, you have the exact same story as me, and everyone listening has the exact same story as me. You went through some crap, you got over some crap, and there's some more crap coming. How and what do you do in that process? It's up to you to tell that story. So why are we going to create distance when we could actually create action?
Do you think the distance between, I love how you frame that, the distance between was action and responsibility, we're trying to put that, I love that. Do you think it's around that we might think we're going to fail in something, and that we don't want to look bad because of that?
I 100% believe that. I don't believe anyone is afraid of failing. I believe they're afraid of what they're telling themselves comes after failing. Shame, guilt, anything like that. The failing itself is normal. And if you think about it, failing is a verb. It's like stubbing your toe. It happens. It's fine. But failure is a noun. It's an identity. It's something you become. So I think failing is completely fine, but we're so terrified of the social currency that we feel like might come, or social debt in this situation of people feeling shame because people might be like, oh, that you weren't good enough. You didn't do it. Not getting the validation. There's some sort of long-term fear, past failure, that's making people say the risk is too much. If I don't try, I can't fail. And if I can't fail, I'll never feel shame or guilt or anything like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're on right now with Chris Ruden. What can a guy with 1.5 arms teach you about adversity, diversity, and inclusion? Everything. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about, you were, born with a physical disability. So that, as we said in the introduction, and tell us the difference between congenital and acquired in disability terms.
Absolutely. So, I have a super cool prosthetic arm now, but for 17 years, I hid my disability. And I think, anytime something happens in life, whether you're born with a congenital birth defect like I was, or it's acquired, it can alter the way you see life, perceive life, and how kind of life interacts with you. And for so long, I thought the way I was born limited who I could become. It's just who I was meant to be. And I built this status of that's who I'm meant to be. But in a congenital situation, you learn to adapt your entire life. So you kind of learn to work around life. And there was a certain point where I was like, okay, what happens if I didn't just work around life, but I started getting life to work around me? That's when I started speaking in the diversity and inclusion space, and just in general, overcoming adversity. We all have a problem. And like you said, not everyone can relate to the disability or anything else that we've gone through specifically. But what you can relate to is we've all had a struggle that kind of weighed on us heavily, mentally, maybe physically, emotionally. And we learn to navigate life with that. And that's exactly what I've done.
I think it's we come up when we're like the physical manifestation of people's journeys, like you say, the riches to rags to riches story. So I was this way, now I'm this way, but I got it all back, but more trouble might be coming, right? So it's this kind of sine wave that continues in life, because we think we have a way that we think about perfection in life, which is not there. And some of the time, what I'll share with individuals is these society markers that hold us back, right? So I'll use, for example, Captain Hook.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Hook's an above the wrist amputee, and he has a hook for a hand. And the reason we're afraid of him is because he has a disability when we're 6 years old, 7 years old. And so all through our lives, from that moment on, when Disney first introduces us to this character, we begin to be afraid of people with disabilities. Then it's compounded when we see this. Hey, good morning. Jeff Jackson is on the line this morning. Let's say good morning to you, Jeff Jackson. I appreciate you. Jeff is an amazing individual, instructional design and that stuff. I think it's really incredible that what happens is we begin to internalize and normalize that in our lives. So every Halloween, we see people with disabilities who frighten us, who scare us. They're designed to scare us so that we pay our ticket and money to be scared by these individuals, from physical disabilities to mental disability as well. I think what happens, excuse me, excuse me, I gotta get some water. And with that is because we're scared, it holds us back from having authentic conversation. So now we want to have a conversation around mental health. But I've seen the Joker, and I've seen Hannibal Lecter. I've seen all these movies that scare me and say mental health, that's bad. So anytime some type of huge trauma happens in our nation, around the world, we just say, oh, those individuals, they just have mental health issues. And we can't have an honest conversation around mental health. I'd love to know some of your thoughts. Is that the way you're thinking about that and going on that, as we say?
So regarding the disability, the term ableism is coming up here,
Yes.
where people just view disability as weak or broken, useless, helpless. There's so many stigmas back that, and movies have kind of created that in multiple subsets of diversity and inclusion.
Right.
Mental health, another thing, we see mental health or declining mental health or poor mental health in a specific situation, and often society relates it to weakness. And especially as a man, you see vulnerability and you're like, oh, I can't be vulnerable, I'm a man. And we see people in mental health crisis and we think of weakness for some reason. Society has created this bubble, but what we have to understand is no label is of value without accepting it. So we have to check those biases and those intrusive thoughts and those stigmas that we might have, those implicit biases. We have no clue. Is this true? Because we know not all feelings are facts. We know that not all feelings are facts. So just because you feel a certain way towards mental health, maybe check that and say, is that true though? Or is that just something I've always heard? Is that something I've always thought, but I don't really have a basis for that? Are they really weak because they're struggling mentally right now? No,
Right.
that's not exactly true. So we have to check those biases. If not, if there's no awareness to that, there's never going to be a solution to a problem you're not willing to face.
All feelings are not facts. I love that with Chris Ruden, just saying that. We have some more folks that just jumped on, and I want to kind of go the opposite way because you talked about a little bit on the weaknesses, especially with some guys. So Lucas Christian, he is on from Switzerland right now. I think he's in Switzerland. Lucas, are you in Switzerland? You got to tell me. He won the gold medal in our competition in 2000 in Sydney, Australia. And so we have that. We have James Possible on, but I want to go back to Lucas in a minute. Real talk, especially when it comes to men. Thanks, James. Appreciate you on that. Well said, Chris, from James Possible as well. Absolutely. It was greatly said. Going back to what Lucas is talking about, listening with a wide open, an open heart. Here's one of the things I think also happens. There becomes this thing because, and I want you to talk about this. I mean, you've been on with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, for goodness sake. And it comes on to this point where people will see individuals as superhuman. And that becomes a stigma within inside of itself. How do you relate that of being on all these television shows? I mean, Titan Games that The Rock begins. How do you relate that to other individuals, A, people with disabilities, and B, kind of the those that are tabs, I call tabs, temporarily able-bodied individuals, given that coin of the name given to me by the late great Judy Heumann. So how do you relate those to it? And Jill Jacobs is on. All right, Jill Jacobs, we got one of our national leaders in the house this morning. Love you, Jill. Can't wait to see you in Washington, D.C. What do you think about that, Chris?
It's a struggle because, like I said in the beginning, people try to put distance to remove responsibility from themselves, whether it's
Yeah,
because you did something great or you have something awful that you are overcoming, so to speak, because we know there's no finish line to mental health. There's no finish line to success, but they see something great, getting a silver or gold medal, being on a TV show with The Rock. I deadlifted 675 pounds, and people are like, "Oh, that's amazing. I can't even do that." It's like, well,
right,
it's not because you aren't disabled. It's because you didn't train as hard as I did, and you didn't commit to something for years and years and years. They look for distance, and no one is superhuman. Some people have abilities that they invest in over time, and they end up getting really good at things. But you can't discount the work that goes into the end
right.
product. A lot of people want to hang out at the finish line without running the race, and that's the issue. And people, every time someone passes the finish line, they're like, I could never do that. You're superhuman. That's amazing. And we're looking at the finish line. We're not looking, not even at the start line, but at the training center way before the start line, because that's not sexy. That's not pretty. We don't want to see you struggle and fail. We want to see you finish with fireworks in the background. But then we're going to talk about those fireworks as if that's why I could never get there, because I'm not superhuman like you. I
Yeah,
wasn't superhuman in the beginning. You weren't superhuman in the beginning. Anyone good at what they're good at was never superhuman in the beginning. If we look for a reason to create distance from responsibility, we'll find it. But if
yeah,
we look for a reason to be inspired, we'll also find it. It's a choice.
yeah. I'm not superhuman now, ever, ever, ever. You said something. I want to make sure I captured it right. I don't think I got the whole thing. I want you to repeat it again for me. We tend to hang out at the finish line without something. What was
Oh
that?
yeah, we people, and I've been guilty of this too. We hang out at the finish line without running the race.
Without
That's
running the race.
what a
Without
lot of
running the
us
race.
want. We want to hang out at the finish line without running the race, and
Oh my
that's
gosh,
just
that's
not
so
how
good.
life works.
Right. Yeah, you got to be in the race. Tell us, a little bit about your clientele and your speaking. How did you kind of get into this business, and who's your kind of main clientele? Before you do that, I always try to honor people when they come in
Do it.
for this. So James Possible, yes, the hero complex for sure. So many of the men's programs lead to hero conversations. Absolutely, and we have another one that just came in here. Let's see. Jeff Jackson puts this, do athletes have a responsibility to tell their creation stories when they succeed? I love that. So why don't we answer your question, the question I just asked you first, and let's have a conversation about Jeff's question of, do athletes have a responsibility? Do you, because you're on this national television show, now is their responsibility to go back and talk about it? So let's go back to the first question, and then we'll come to this one.
I think it's a personal choice, because like we said, all people sometimes they feel like they're on pedestals, whether it's celebrities or anything like that. I really think it's a personal choice, because if that athlete wasn't in the mental health space to speak on their journey, maybe that's not an appropriate thing for them at that time. For me personally, I vow to be the person I never had growing up. So I am committed to telling the story of how I got to where I am and where I'm going, affecting the people who look up at me, because I never had that. I
Mhm.
never got to see someone on TV like me. I never got to see another speaker like myself. I never had these pathways. So I'm going to create them for the people who might want that. I feel like that's my responsibility, but I feel like it's personal. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that we do have these. I think there's a pathway forward on both sides of the coin. What I want to do is I was going to take the opposing view of whatever you said on Jeff's question, and just kind of play the devil's advocate, right, for it. And so some of the things I've heard. So Jeff said, and we'll kind of come back to this because James Possible said something too. Jeff said, do athletes have a responsibility? So you've done this work, right, and kind of leading in with your last answer you gave. Do they or do they not have responsibility to tell their creation stories? Or how do they get their story? The overcoming the monster story, maybe. And when you say that, I'm going to take the opposite way. I'm going to take the opposite viewpoint, right?
So for me, I'd be like, I feel like I can't give a direct yes or no, because it really depends on the
And I can't. You can't give a direct yes or no. Then I can't go the
I'm,
opposite way.
I'm gonna try my best here.
Just pick a lane. Pick a lane. Just pick a side.
I believe they don't have a responsibility to tell their creation story.
Okay. Why?
It is completely up to the person. So it's not a responsibility because they're human, and it's requiring someone to acknowledge or divulge something is an expectation of people on other people. And they would never like that done to themselves. So I expect you to do something for me because you did something for you. And I don't believe that's how that works. It's almost like if you expected me to tell you my disability story, well, what happens if I didn't want to? Is that okay?
No, because I'm gonna take the opposite side. It's not okay, Chris. No, it's not. And I think you have a personal responsibility to tell your creation story, because you have to help somebody on their journey. It's your responsibility to inspire, to push. An inspiration means that we're going to add value, add oxygen into somebody else. And so that because we have gone through the fire, so to speak, it's our responsibility to go back and help somebody else through theirs. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I don't believe that.
I see both sides. I see both sides.
Because it sounds so stupid, right?
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't believe it's a personal journey for everybody. I totally believe that what you're saying, but I wanted to show people the opposite side.
Yeah, you got to see all sides of the coin, so you can make the decision.
Yeah, for sure. And so James is like, I'm laughing my butt off right there, right? That's so great. Exactly, he says exactly. Someone else's expectation is not your expectation, for sure, 100%. And so we see this all the time. How do you, when you're doing your presentations on DEI, are you seeing a shift in that marketplace right now of the, I call it disability inclusion, because everybody can become a part of a tab, like I said earlier, can become part of the community, whether you're congenital or you acquire one later on in life. There's an intersection that happens, I believe, and that intersection is when you run up against somebody or something that denies you opportunity in the space. So are you seeing, we just saw the Supreme Court yesterday just kind of took away some affirmative actions, which is probably going to impact people with disabilities in getting into education, higher institutions. What do you see that there's something that's being taken away, or do you see the opportunity that despite the obstacle?
I mean, I think there's an opportunity in everything. And if anything, it's just putting it more in the mainstream to see how big of a problem that is. But in talking about, do I see like movement in the DEI space or anything? It's unfortunate because the companies that hire me are not the companies that need to hire me. The companies that lean into DEI or accessibility or anything around that topic often hire me multiple times, but they already get the message. They get it. They embrace it. They're leaning in. It's the other companies that don't see the value in it yet. Those are the ones I'm trying to reach more. So, you can see all the amazing stuff, like all these talks coming in, but you're like, but I want those because those are where the impact is. And that's where I feel like I could do damage, That's the frustrating part in the DEI space for sure.
The crazy thing is Accenture did a report in Q4 of 2019, 18 or 19, I can't remember which one now. And it looked at two like companies. I mean, major Fortune 500 companies. Company A that promotes, retains, hires people with disabilities, and company B that does not. The report is called Getting to Equal, the Disability Advantage by Accenture. And when they measured it, just on outputs and certain outputs, the output around revenue was company A actually outperformed company B, two like companies, 2-to-1 to shareholder returns, which caused the comptroller of New York State, Mr. Tom DiNapoli, to say, I'm going to invest these $1 trillion of pension funds that I have for New Yorkers into company A's and not company B's. I'm going to get a higher rate of return on my investment. And we still see people, companies, leadership, not valuing people with disabilities in the workplace, who are the most adaptable people, because they've had to figure it out, either whether they hid it away or whether they acknowledge, as I said, I need an accommodation for my work. I just need to work from home. Actually, no, we want you to be a part of the team. We want you to come here. And then pandemic hits and we're all working from home.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we can all adapt to that. I think that inclusion and being able to be not just included, but accepted into the framework where it's just culturally is the fastest way to profitability. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that, and we'll get ready to close our segment out here.
People are committed to guarding their bad decisions, like I'm trying to take them or something. People have, whether it's founder syndrome or whatever it is, they believe that their way is the way and not a way, They believe that their way is the way. And regardless of the data, regardless of the money, you would think money would influence that. Regardless of, here's the data, we're showing you that your way is not as profitable as this way, the inclusive way. They're like, I know what's best for me. And that's crazy to me, is the commitment to tunnel vision, the commitment to being less inclusive. It blows my mind, but I understand from a founder syndrome. And if you've ever had that belief in doing something, I know I'm doing the best I possibly could, but it's only because you're allowing yourself to be this close to the wall, and you can't see the bigger picture unless you zoom out. So until those people zoom out, those companies will never be inclusive, regardless of the money that's coming in for inclusive companies.
Love it. Hey, we've been talking with Chris Ruden. Thank you so much for being on. I want to put one more up here. Lucas had something to say, I think, on the previous part of our conversation. To be human is already super. To master everyday life is already amazing enough. Absolutely, Lucas. And from The Incredibles, when everyone is super, no one will be. So that from Syndrome. So that's great. Anything I have missed that you want to get out for people that are listening in today, and then we'll wrap the show up.
I think everything's great, man. I appreciate you having me. As a speaker myself, I've been kind of like a one-man army over the last 5 years, and I love this. I want to do this for the rest of my life, and I've gotten to these levels that I'd never thought were possible. And just having companies and organizations believe in me enough to hear me out, it's just a drastic difference from how I grew up to where I'm at now. So just to even be here, like talking with you, man, I'm just very thankful to have made it, here.
Well, how can people get a hold of you? How can they find you?
So it's at Chris Ruden for everything. My website is chrisruden.com, and all of my socials are at Chris Ruden. Feel free to drop me a line if you ever want to go deep in thought or just talk about anything. I'm here.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Stay on for a second. We'll close the show out. Hey, I want to appreciate everybody that's been on today. We've been talking with Chris Ruden, and what an amazing interview that we have. Go back, rewind the tape, get what you need out of this, because it was a great conversation around why we don't take action on some things and what happens when we actually do. So for that, we have we're going to wrap this segment up. We'll see you next Friday. I think I'm going to be in Paris during that time. Hopefully we get a chance to see the legend, the guy that kicked my butt over there in Sydney, Australia, the legend Lucas Christian. If you jump on the train, Lucas, come on, let's hang out. But for next week, drop me a line, put it in john@johnregister.com. Drop me a quick little line of what you think we should talk about next week. We'll put that in there. If not, I got plenty of ideas right here, baby. Plenty of ideas just to do that. Thank you once again to Chris Ruden. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Go forth, inspire your world, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.